All right, so right now we are going to take a look at the elevation. Again, the setup for the drawing is the same as always, 17 by 11, scale at 1/2 inch equals a foot, title block along the bottom. But one of the first things you'll notice is that on elevations, we need to use a lettering system with these elevation markers so that the contractor knows which wall elevation they are looking at. Now this little symbol, this A with an arrow, is called an elevation marker, and you'll also see, if you remember back to the floor plan video, that these are on the floor plan. And I want to take a look at that just 1 minute here. So if we go back to the floor plan, you'll see that that same elevation marker is included on the floor plan. And again, the A and the arrow points to which wall we are seeing an elevation of. So we were looking at elevation A, and if we come to the floor plan, we can see that elevation A is a drawing of this wall right here. Okay, so the elevation markers on the floor plan relate directly to which wall is being drawn in elevation view. So you will see, based on this floor plan and the 3 elevation markers that are provided, there are 3 elevations that will also be included. 1 elevation of wall A, 1 elevation of wall B, and 1 elevation of wall C. There is not an elevation for wall D because there is not any cabinetry placed on that wall. However, you will frequently have all 4 walls with cabinetry or appliances, and therefore you would have 4 elevation markers here for A, B, C, and D. In some instances, if there's an island, you might even have a 5th or 6th elevation provided to show the front, back, or side of that island as well. So let's go back to the elevation and see how the elevation drawing itself looks. So again, when we're looking at the elevation, labeling that with the same letter that it refers to on the floor plan is extremely important. So again, that the contractor can look at the floor plan and see which wall this is an elevation of. So you always want to make sure you have it labeled A, B, C, D, etc., depending on which wall you're currently drawing. Now, an elevation drawing is if you were to stand back and look at that wall. It is always drawn in 2 dimensions, so it's not quite like a perspective where you have it drawn on angles. It's not that tricky. It's always drawn flat, but it allows you to see what that wall would look like. Now let's take a look at the dimensions, because the dimensions are a bit more complex when it comes to elevations. We still have the 3 dimension strings, the innermost, the middle, and the outer dimension string. And some of them do not change. Again, you can see this outermost dimension still dimensions the overall length of the wall. And you'll see that the middle dimension string still dimensions the center lines to appliances and fixtures. Again, that would be things like your dishwasher, your sink, or your microwave. You will notice that dimension strings are pulled on all 4 sides of the elevation. That is an NKBA standard, even if some of the dimensions are redundant. For example, the 96 inches for the overall height is indicated on both sides, as well as the 127 inches for the length of the wall is indicated both on top and bottom. Even though it's redundant, we still pull those dimension strings on all 4 sides of the elevation. The difference here is with this innermost dimension string. If you remember on the floor plan, we did not use that to dimension cabinet sizes. We only used it to dimension openings. However, on the elevation, it's a bit different. You'll see that we are actually dimensioning the cabinet widths as well as appliance widths. You will also dimension the height for the toe kick, the cabinet, the countertop, and the backsplash, the distance between the backsplash and the upper or wall cabinets, the height of the wall cabinet, and then the crown molding, and then the distance from the crown molding to the ceiling. So you're basically dimensioning every little part of those cabinets. And the height dimensions in particular are extremely important because this is the only spot where that distance is noted. So this is the only spot that tells the contractor at exactly what height to hang those wall cabinets from. We do also still note the opening of the window, and again it's to the outside of the window trim. And then again you'll note the width of the cabinets on the elevation. So you always want to move through the dimensions on an elevation pretty slowly and really concentrate and make sure that you are providing the width and various height measurements for that particular wall of cabinets. One last thing I want to point out is that you'll see this X here on each of these cabinets. That is where the cabinet turns the corner and it starts coming at you. So here, this cabinet is now coming towards us. And what you do is you basically, it's as if you cut through that cabinet and we're just looking at it. So wall cabinets are generally 12 inches deep, and we just show that that wall is now, or that cabinet is now coming at us. So we just put an X through it. And similar here on the base cabinet, base cabinets are typically 24 inches deep, and we would just draw the X through as the cabinet begins to come towards us. This wall cabinet is on an angle. It's a corner wall cabinet, but we don't actually draw on an angle. You'll see that it's still drawn straight across with the rest of the cabinets because it's in elevation. And again, elevations are always two-dimensional, never three-dimensional. So this can sometimes be a bit tricky to get used to and used to actually seeing, but the more you familiarize yourself with it and the more you practice elevations, the better you'll get. And lastly, you'll notice that there is generally just one elevation per page. Again, it's because they're drawn at 1/2 inch equals a foot, and you could probably fit 2 on, but it would start to get a bit crowded, especially with the dimensions. So we generally draw one elevation per page, and you'll typically have at least 4 elevations, sometimes more if it's necessary for an island. Again, take your time with elevations. They're a bit more complex, especially with this inner dimension string that changes a bit because we are adding some new dimensions for the width of the cabinets as well.